Kesu Park, the Critical Race Studies Fellow at UCLA School of Law, has written an article entitled, "The ACLU Needs to Rethink Free Speech." You know what? I don't think it does. The ACLU has a long history of defending the First Amendment rights of groups on both the far left and the far right. This commitment led the organization to successfully sue the city of Charlottesville, Virginia last week on behalf of a white supremacist rally organizer. Well, yeah, I'm told that the white supremacist scumbags had the proper permits for the venue, and the police shut it down anyway. So, suing just seems like, considering the waste of all those people's time, how much money must have gone into the preparation for this, suing seems like the next logical step. Forget their ideology, police shut down this event that cost a lot of people a lot of money, and they shut it down illegally. Sue! You need to get your money back! The rally ended with a Nazi sympathizer plowing his car into a crowd, killing a counter-protester and injuring many. Well, no, the rally ended when police shut it down and funneled the white supremacist scumbags into a crowd of Antifa and BLM scumbags. At which point violence erupted. Now, who started the violence? The left, the right. It was the fucking police who shut it down illegally and funneled these two groups into each other. That's who started the fucking violence. So, the rally was already well over when a Nazi sympathizer scumbag plowed his car into a crowd, killing a counter-protester and injuring many. After the ACLU was excoriated for its stance, it responded that preventing the government from controlling speech is absolutely necessary to the promotion of equality. Of course that's true. The hope is that by successfully defending hate groups, its legal victories will fortify free speech rights across the board. Yeah, that is exactly correct. Exactly correct. So, on that part, you and I and most reasonable people can agree. While admirable in theory, this approach implies that the country is on a level playing field, that at some point it overcame its history of racial discrimination to achieve a real democracy, the cornerstone of which is freedom of expression. No, it doesn't imply that. It implies that to achieve the things Park suggests are already implied, freedom of expression, which Park admits is the cornerstone of a real democracy, is paramount. I, Park, volunteered with the ACLU as a law student in 2011, and I respect much of its work, but it should rethink how it understands free speech. By insisting on a narrow reading of the First Amendment, the organization provides free legal support to hate-based causes. More troubling, the legal gains on which the ACLU rests its colorblind logic have never secured real freedom or even safety for all. I'm not sure what Park means by real freedom. Are there rights Park thinks Americans should enjoy that they don't? Is that part of the healthcare debate? That's debatable, but that's something you need to take up with your local or regional politician. And safety for all, well, that goes right out the window, and I'll tell you why. Taking risks in an attempt to make gains is part of freedom, and taking a risk is very specifically the exact opposite of safety. So, you can't provide safety for all, and especially when it comes to risk-taking in the attempt to make gains, you shouldn't even attempt to create that. For marginalized communities, the power of expression is impoverished for reasons that have little to do with the First Amendment. Numerous other factors in the public sphere chill their voices but amplify others. Yeah, maybe. But a good message will get out regardless. Because as much influence as these other factors might have on a message to slow it down or dampen it, they don't have the power to stop it or to silence it completely. The proof on this one, and oh, I'm a white guy, Martin Luther Kinging, is Martin Luther King. Of course there were factors trying to stop Martin Luther King's message from getting out. But it was a good message, and it led to a march of, I don't know how many men, and an entire civil rights movement. Good messages will be heard as long as we have the First Amendment. Most obviously, the power of speech remains proportional to wealth in this country, despite the growth of social media. When the Supreme Court did consider the impact of money on speech in Citizens United, it enabled corporations to translate wealth into direct political power. The ACLU wrongly supported this devastating ruling on First Amendment grounds. I don't know if they were wrong about that. I was pretty unhappy about it, not going to lie. It felt a little bit corrupt. But then, of course, that idea of enabling corporations to translate wealth into direct political power was proven wrong when the corporation's puppet, Hillary Clinton, failed to get elected president. A black kid who gets thrown in jail for possessing a small amount of marijuana will face consequences that will directly affect his ability to have a voice in public life. How does the ACLU's conception of free speech address that? I honestly don't know, but I don't think a marijuana charge and jail time are the only factors involved there. Who am I thinking? There was this black kid who was mayor of D.C., and then he got caught smoking crack and actually went to federal prison and then was elected mayor of D.C. again. The ACLU has demonstrated that it knows how to think about other rights in a broader context. It vigorously defends the consideration of race in university admissions, for example, even as conservative challengers insist on a colorblind notion of the right to equal protection. Well, I'm just curious how Park feels, being a university-educated person, about having points deducted from her SAT score because she's Asian. When it wants to approach an issue with sensitivity toward context, the ACLU can distinguish between actual racism and spurious claims of reverse racism. That's right, because anti-white factions can't be racist. Because racism equals prejudice plus power. And non-white people don't have power in society. But to think that requires an admission of prejudice. And anti-white factions, or far-left factions, BLM and Antifa, are angling for power. And do you think for one fucking second that if they ever obtained power, that the prejudice would just go away? The government's power is not the only thing that can degrade freedom of expression, which Justice Benjamin Cardozo once described as the matrix, the indispensable condition of nearly every other form of freedom. Justice Cardozo is not wrong. The question the organization should ask itself is, could prioritizing First Amendment rights make the distribution of power in this country even more unequal and further silence the communities most burdened by histories of censorship? The answer to this is a very technical and quite resounding no. No, it can't do that. Enforcing freedom of expression for all people ends histories of censorship. By enforcing free speech for those once censored. This is a vital question because a well-funded machinery ready to harass journalists and academics has arisen in the space beyond First Amendment litigation. If you challenge hateful speech, gird yourself for death threats and for your family to be harassed. You know, death threats are illegal. They go beyond free speech and become calls to action which can be criminal. But the harassment, as it's referred to here, is most likely cases of people vehemently disagreeing. And disagreement is part of free speech. People will have differing opinions and will voice them. That's not a bad thing. Left-wing academics across the country face this kind of speech suppression, yet they do not benefit from a strong, uniform legal response. On this point, I agree, especially if you're talking about left-wing professors like Brett Weinstein or Jordan Peterson. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. You were talking only about black professors. My bad, didn't mean to spoil your narrative. Several black professors have been threatened with lynching, shooting, or rape for denouncing white supremacy. In all honesty, I haven't seen professors denounce white supremacy. I've seen them declare it, like, all white people contribute to white supremacy. Government suppression takes more subtle forms too. Some of the protesters at President Trump's inauguration are facing felony riot charges and decades in prison. The ACLU is defending only a handful of those 200 plus protesters. The protesters being charged with felony riot and facing decades in prison are the protesters who harmed other human beings, who destroyed property, who set fires. It's not like people who protested Trump got arrested. People who committed crimes got arrested. This is getting worse and worse with every fucking paragraph. States are considering laws that forgive motorists who drive into protesters. No. States are considering laws that forgive motorists who drive through a crowd of people who are attacking them. That's what they're forgiving. If you're under attack, drive away. It doesn't matter who's in front of you. And that's justifiable. And police arrive with tanks and full weaponry at anti-racist protests? With tanks? Okay, no, seriously. If someone has seen this, please send me this. Send me pictures and articles revolving around this. Because tanks? What? And as far as I can tell, for the most part, police pull out when leftist Antifa BLM show up somewhere to be violent. They just disappear. But not at white supremacist rallies. This article was printed after Charlottesville. I don't know when it was written, but it was printed after, and it is very, very clear that armed police illegally shut down the rally at Charlottesville. I don't know if you're misinformed. I don't know if Park is lying. All I know is she's wrong. The dangers that communities face because of their speech isn't equal. On this, I couldn't agree with Park more. Being slightly conservative is grounds for being fired at Google, and not being left enough is enough to be demonetized and shadow banned all over YouTube. It's horrific. The ACLU's decision to offer legal support to a right-wing cause than to a left-wing cause won't make it so. Rather, it perpetuates a misguided theory that all radical views are equal. And again, no. No, it fucking doesn't imply what you've decided to infer. It perpetuates the quite correct theory that all radical views are equally protected under the law. And it fuels right-wing free speech hypocrisy. Guess what? Hypocrisy is free speech. It's protected. You know, the way the entirety of this article is hypocritical and yet protected speech. It doesn't fuel hypocrisy. It protects it. Perhaps most painful, it also redistributes some of the substantial funds the organization has received to fight white supremacy toward defending that cause. It's not the Anti-White Supremacy Union, Park. It's the American Civil Liberties Union. All of its funds are supposed to be for protecting civil liberties, not for fighting white supremacy. What the fuck is wrong with you? Pay attention. The ACLU needs a more contextual, creative advocacy when it comes to how it defends the freedom of speech. The group should imagine a holistic picture of how speech rights are under attack right now, not focus on only First Amendment case law. It must research how new threats to speech are connected to one another and to right-wing power. Acknowledging how criminal laws, voting laws, immigration laws, education laws, and laws governing corporations can also curb expression would help it develop better policy positions. She doesn't come out and say it. She doesn't come out and say that she wants to limit freedom of speech for certain groups, or she wants to limit certain kinds of speech. She's far too clever for that. She's far too well educated. Which now in my mind, this paragraph expresses to me that means she's far too conniving to do it. She wants to limit the ability of right-wingers to speak their mind. And don't you worry, Park. Google and YouTube are on that shit. Sometimes standing on the wrong side of history in defense of a cause you think is right is still just standing on the wrong side of history. And I really hope that Park meditates on that last phrase. I hope she thinks about her Korean ancestors while she meditates on that, and thinks about the difference between North Korea and South Korea, because right now she is very much, in this article, best Korean. And she can go fuck herself. Last time, I found a Jewish comedian Nazi. And this time, I found a Korean lady scholar / lawyer Nazi. You see how identity doesn't matter and only ideology does? I had to change the name of this channel to the fucking Nazi Hunter. Christ. I'm Irving Twin. Like, subscribe, or don't. It's free country. At least it used to be.